Hi there, and welcome to game number 9 of the Carlsen and Anand World Championship match being played in Sochi, Russia. Now, at the beginning of this match, Anand trailed Carlsen by a point, and over the course of this is the fourth last game, so over the course of the last 4 games, Anand needs to claw back a minimum of a point to be able to stand any chance whatsoever in the match. And for Carlsen, if he can keep Anand shut out as far as the remainder of the match is concerned, then he will be successfully defending his title. Without further ado, let's have a look at what Carlsen had in store. And it was, as with all his other white games, he opened with e4, which then went e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, knight f6, castle short, knight takes e4, d4, knight d6, bishop takes c6, d takes c6, and d takes e5. And as you can see so far, we've launched back into the Berlin defense, otherwise known as the Berlin Wall, and it is up to Carlsen, if he so wishes, to see if he can crack the Berlin Wall, because Berlin Wall defense games invariably land up being drawn. And the strange part about it is that the Berlin defense is normally a system employed by black looking to draw the game. Now, with Anand being a point down in the match, we would have thought that he would have launched into some sort of an opening that would have given him much more of a chance to maybe play for the win, even with the black pieces, because the number of games remaining are getting fewer and fewer. But nonetheless, Anand chose to go with the Berlin Wall defense, and it remains to be seen whether or not Carlsen brought sufficient dynamite with him to be able to blow the Berlin Wall to pieces. The game continued with knight f5, an exchange of queens which traps the black king in the center of the board, h3, king e8, knight c3, h5, knight e2, and b6 for black. So what we have going here is that on the king side of the board we have a 4 versus 3 pawn formation, and on the queen side of the board it is black that has the 4 pawns versus white's 3. But of black's 4 pawns, anybody can see that this c7 pawn is sitting in an incredibly weakened space. However, to black's advantage, he has the pair of bishops, even though the black king is trapped in the center of the board while the white king is safely castled away. So that's the effect of the situation. We've got that coming out of the opening, and with typical Berlin Wall type situation, we're coming out of the opening with a lot of piece and pawn exchanges that have already taken place. So, as with most Berlin Wall defenses, we seem to be barreling straight out of an opening into an endgame with nothing in between. Another item that must be said is that for his move b6 that Anand has just played, he thought for 59 seconds, which is by far, up until this point at move number 11, the longest think of the entire game. With the remainder of the game's moves thus far, having Carlsen with one move. Carlsen's 11th move was a 37-second thing. Anand's 9th was 10 seconds. Carlsen's 7th was 20 seconds, and everything else was under 10 seconds of move time. So you can see that at this stage both players are solidly way inside their home preparation, and obviously solidly buried inside standard Berlin Wall theory. So really nothing to be thinking about. However, at this point, Carlsen sat down and thought for just under 5 minutes and came to light with the centralizing move of rook to d1. Anand, on the other hand, sat for a further 3 minutes and came up with bishop a6. It must be noted at the moment that both players are following move for move the game that was played between Dominguez and Ponomariov in Lyon in 2012. So there's absolutely nothing new thus far, and both players are following that game exactly. However, possibly Carlsen was thinking whether or not he's going to be uncorking a novelty at this point, because he now sat for a further 15 minutes before playing knight f4, which still follows that Dominguez Ponomariov game from 2012. And Anand, on the other hand, sat for 6 minutes before playing bishop b7. However, at this point we are deviating away from Dominguez versus Ponomariov in Lyon in 2012, because that game continued with rook d8, and I'm just going to do a fly through of the moves of that game so you can just see how the sequence continued as far as that game is concerned. And what you can clearly see happening here is that Dominguez with the white pieces is building up a space advantage. He's maintained his 4 versus 3 pawn advantage on the king side of the board and managed to develop a passed pawn ramming down the center of the board towards the black king. And the game now continued with Dominguez increasing his pressure and his advantage as he developed, and this game was eventually won by white. So obviously not wanting to head along the lines of a game that's already been shown to be completely won by white, that is no doubt why Anand chose to make his deviation. There's just a couple moves left to run through in this game. There we go. And as you can see in this position, that white is clearly winning, and in this position was where black resigned, because there's nothing really that black can do to prevent the knight from getting in behind those kingside pawns, mopping them up, because the bishop needs to stay on defensive duties to be able to cover that a pawn and prevent it from queening. So that is how the game concluded. As in all likelihood in this position, the only move really available to black in this position might have been something along the lines of, for instance, King D7, and then the knight goes out to E5 with check, and that G pawn will be the first of the 3 to 4. So getting back to the game at hand, Anand then chose to play bishop B7, and then Carlsen had another good long think and went E6, and here after move 14, with hindsight after the end of the game, one might be tempted to argue that black should have maybe deviated with something strong like f takes e6, knight g6, rook g8, bishop f4, but it's still, black's pawn position, pawn structure looks completely dreadful here, and in all likelihood the outcome of this position would most likely be suiting white, especially considering the fact that he's already got the strong control of the d file, with the possibility of running the rook up the d file and bringing the other rook in behind to double up the rooks running along the d file, which would obviously then suit white much better. So here at move 14 after e6, Anand played bishop d6, and that just allowed Carlsen to neutralize the game really quickly and apply much more match pressure on top of Anand for the remaining games of the match. So Carlsen played e takes f, obviously the king takes, now Carlsen comes in with knight g5, the king goes to f6, the knight comes back to e4, the king goes back to f7, the knight comes back to g5, the king comes up to f6, knight e4 check, king f7, and obviously knight g5 check is threefold repetition, perpetual check, and Carlsen closes out the game with a draw. That leaves the match at 5 games to 4, with 9 games played, with Carlsen having the lead in the match, and it means that of the remaining 3 games that Anand has the white pieces in 2 of them, Anand has to convert something. The time is running drastically short for him, and bearing in mind that Anand has managed to beat Carlsen once in this match already, but bearing in mind that that one victory is the first time that Anand has beaten Carlsen since 2010. I'm very sure that Carlsen is acutely aware of this, and it will be interesting to see what Anand comes out with tomorrow in game 10, when he has his second last white piece game of the match. But that is how the game concluded, a draw between the 2 players in only 20 moves. I'm pretty sure that the spectators that bought tickets to the arena would have been a little bit disappointed with a game that concluded so quickly, especially if you consider that the game finished after 20 moves, and up until move 12 the players had been effectively playing their moves in under 10 seconds. So not really much for the spectators to be able to watch. It was all over just about before it started. So we'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow in game number 10. But please post your comments and questions down below, and also click the thumbs up, like button below this video as well. Share this out amongst your chess friends, and last but by no means least, just below the left hand corner of this video screen in YouTube is a big red subscribe button. Click on that as well, that way you can be kept up to date on all of the new videos as I post them on a day-to-day basis, covering the remaining 3 games of this World Championship match. Stay carved up for the win. I'll be seeing you next time. Cheers.